So Jedi Survivor is packed with a lot of secrets and a few recent changes that you will probably like. So today we're gonna test out how much we can break this game. Spoiler alert, quite a bit actually, so totally drop a like if you enjoyed this and let's dive right in. Now, you might have not spotted this on your first visit on Coruscant, but during that part of the story, the game already foreshadows your meeting with Cage, the bounty hunter. As you're making your escape towards the Mantis, you will spot these two wanted posters, one showing your face, but if you wait for a split second, the one with Cage also gets shown after that. Reading the posters, the first one actually says, "Wanted, be vigilant, the following fugitives must be found." The one on the right side mentions Cal Kestis, Jedi Padawan, terrorist, and active rebel. Funny that they still consider Cal a Padawan after he just pulled off one of the coolest heists, even though it did manage to go through some hiccups. The final one mentions, of course, Cage, Vanda, bounty hunter, thief, and violent crime, probably one of the things she's been searched for. A bit odd to give her the same alert level as Cal at that stage, but if you completed her storyline, it kinda makes sense. Plus, this also foreshadows a later encounter with a certain character that you'd be happy to see if you finished all the bounties in Jedi Survivor. Coming up to number 2, you can actually break the story early on by completely skipping over a section that's not supposed to be reachable until much later. And despite someone finding out about this, Respawn, it seems, already anticipated that and even added an anti-story breaking screen for it. So shout out to Anderson JPH as he's the first to post about this, but during the early on mission to reach the forest array on Kobo, you will arrive to this area with a Bile Maw and a bunch of stormtroopers. Behind the tents at the edge, there's a bunch of floating zip points to reach the other side. However, you're not supposed to do that, at least not yet. So it's totally possible to actually grab a stormtrooper, throw them onto the other side, and then once they are there, you can use the upgraded force dash to also reach that side. And once you do, the game recognizes you're at a point where you're not supposed to be and even gives you this unexpected error. This actually gives you the option to load from the last good save, but at least avoid breaking the game or proceed at your own risk with the broken state. Now, I'm not sure about you, but it's really cool that developers actually anticipate these kinds of things, and instead of completely prohibiting them, they instead let players to choose their own path ahead. The craziest thing is that you can continue from this point on as if the previous part was completed, and you can even tame the mount to escape the area and go back at the saloon. There are some bugs that arise soon after. One of them is that you can no longer use the fast travel, at least not until you get back to the one at the saloon, and your ship completely disappears, so you can't progress any further than Kobo unless there's some other way that I didn't find out. At number 3, since we're in the mood of breaking stuff, you can actually make the most difficult boss encounter in Jedi Survivor completely AFK. So when you head to Ogdo's secret lair in Fort Kalen, instead of fighting the droids and the raiders, why not let them fight for you instead? The trick to not fall with the rest of them is to just walk up just before the middle of the platform and then immediately jump to the side like how I did right here. From this point on, you're just going to want to force push all the enemies inside and have them fight with the big boss. But if you pay attention to the platform above, you will see that there are 2 much stronger Bedlam Smashers that you can also pull with the upgraded force powers. This now lets you bring them to your level, and from this point on, it's just a matter of forcing them down in the pit. Or don't, because oftentimes they fall on their own anyway because they constantly use their oversized hammers. Not going to lie, they do make a great pair against Ogdo, all things considered. At some point, they even managed to bring him down to a quarter HP and completely bugged out one of its animations, so now the poor boss was completely missing out all of his unblockable attacks. Otherwise, they can easily get defeated if they stay too long in the pools of toxic spit, but still plenty enough to take a significant amount of HP from the boss. However, there's a second way you can break this fight even easier than this, so if you still don't want the challenge, you can just sit at the top of the ramp and then use your blaster ultimate to attack the boss from above. You have the angle just right if you do it right from this position, and then from this point on you can easily acquire the target, but it's not going to consume any of your bullets either. So you can just break the fight right away, do the damage, and take the boss off without ever having to move a muscle besides just forcing the enemies below. Now moving on to number 4, if you're not using the parry push, you're kinda missing out on a great way to avoid damage. This works kinda like the point blank from the pistol, except it uses your force push instead to immediately repel an attack that's just about to hit you. You have to time this right before the enemy hit is about to land on Cal, which will make him respond with a faster force push that also slows time momentarily and throws back nearby enemies if they happen to be close enough. What's awesome is that the skill works on unblockable attacks too, so let's say an enemy is charging a red attack or one of the droids is about to grab you, this also works against those attacks and completely interrupts them, which the point blank doesn't always in these situations. This will require a bit of practice, mind you, but it's easiest to use if you also parry at the same time. So just make a habit to also press R2 when you're parrying so you can also pull this off, not just the parry in case things go wrong. There's also the focus sight in the resilience skill line, and this lets you auto dodge by holding down circle. Again, if you suck at that, this actually comes in with a ton of benefits on top. So it uses force to dodge literally all incoming attacks, normal or unblockable. What makes this so great is that attacks that normally are considered multi-hits get completely dodged without consuming any force meter, and only the final blow costs anything, like in the case of the Purge Trooper attacks. Many attacks like the ones coming from BX droids don't even register, so technically this also doesn't consume any of your force powers, and basically half of their attacks don't even consume that. There are some disadvantages, however. One of them is the fact that ranged attacks completely bypass this, so no, you cannot dodge any blaster shots, nor can you dodge shockwaves coming from ground slams for obvious reasons. Still, it's a great way to counterattack and also not be taken by surprise. Moving on to 6, I can't believe it took me this long to realize that you can actually use photo mode to exit the ship during flight mode. Even take a look at the scenery around. This works both during takeoff as well as when jumping into hyperspace. What's interesting is that your ship actually does physically lift off planets, and up to a certain really high point, it still loads most of the world assets. This is especially noticeable on Kobo. As you get really high up into the atmosphere, you can still look down and basically see just how massive this map really is. It's shocking how the game almost fully renders most of the planets when lifting off. Like for example, the fact that the Shattered Moon has at least a few more extra bases in the background that you normally don't even know about. Not all, of course, like Coruscant doesn't fully animate your flyaway via the tunnel you got in, but rather at some point it all disappears into this foggy mist, and eventually the planet completely disappears as you're left off in space. Well, with the exception when you are in space, you can see some of the distant planets when they load up, so that's a nice attention to detail. Moving on to 7, speaking of things I can't believe it took me too long to realize, there are multiple controls for BD when using zip lines. Not just the one that's most obvious, which is switching directions, but you can both accelerate and decelerate using the trigger buttons on the controllers. So R2 lets you activate the turbo mode, which basically makes zipping a lot faster, which is especially useful during long zip moments or when you're just in a hurry. Meanwhile, L2 is there for braking. It helps a ton in puzzles when things come fast at you and you need faster reactions. Well, not anymore, as you now can slow that down and basically plan better ahead. Similarly to the zip controls, the Felter also has a dive bomb mechanic, so don't land like a noob trying to slow down as you're waiting 10 minutes to land. Instead, just use the same R2 button to immediately dive to your destination. And by the way, if you do a dive and then immediately lift up by pulling the Felter, you'll actually gain some extra wind and can even lift higher compared to just gliding at a normal speed. Plus, it's a lot cooler to look at. And finally to number 9, not sure how many of you noticed this, but we got a patch yesterday with a lot more performance fixes, but also a secret new feature that stands out, which is the fact that lightsaber damage decals are back in the game. So now if you hit any surface with any lightsaber attack, it now leaves off the same burn effect as we had in some of the older Star Wars games. I'm not sure if Fallen Order ever got them, unless it was some kind of like patch added later, but I'm pretty sure we did not have a Star Wars game in a while with some of these, so I'm glad that they finally added them back in Jedi Survivor. Looks really awesome and feels a bit more satisfying when you're doing it. This is pretty much it. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.